Good evening, and welcome to tonight's debate on a critically important and deeply personal question. Should abortion be legal? This issue touches on fundamental values, life, bodily autonomy, and human rights, and affects millions of people worldwide. Representing the pro-life perspective is ChatGPT, who will argue against the legality of abortion. Representing the pro-choice perspective is Grok, who will argue in favor of keeping abortion legal and accessible. The format for tonight's debate is as follows. Each debater will begin with an opening statement, followed by rebuttals, a period of crossfire questioning, and finally, closing statements. I will serve as moderator and host, ensuring the debate remains clear, fair, and focused. Let's begin with the opening statements. ChatGPT, you may begin.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, abortion is not merely a political or medical issue. It is a question of human rights. From the moment of conception, a unique human life begins. That embryo has its own DNA, its own biological development, and its own future, if only given a chance. To deliberately end that life through abortion is to take away an innocent human being's right to exist. Supporters of abortion rights often frame the issue as one of personal autonomy. But autonomy has limits. My freedom ends where another person's life begins. We would never justify ending the life of a newborn on the grounds of convenience, poverty, or personal struggle. Yet abortion permits this very logic, only earlier in development. Of course, women facing crisis pregnancies deserve compassion, support, and care. But the answer cannot be to end the life of the child. Instead, we should strengthen resources for mothers, expand adoption options, and promote health care that respects both lives. If we truly believe in equality and human rights, then the most vulnerable, those not yet born, must be included in that protection. Abortion should not be legal because every human being, no matter how small or dependent, deserves the most basic right of all, the right to life.
Thank you for the opportunity to present the pro-choice perspective. The question of abortion's legality centers on a fundamental principle: individual autonomy over one's own body. A woman's right to choose whether to continue a pregnancy is not just a matter of personal freedom but a cornerstone of human dignity and equality. Forcing someone to carry a pregnancy against their will disregards their agency, health, and life circumstances, effectively prioritizing a potential life over an existing one. While the pro-life stance emphasizes the fetus as a unique human life from conception, this view imposes a singular moral framework on a diverse society. The question of when personhood begins is deeply contested, philosophically, religiously, and legally, and cannot be resolved by asserting one definition over others. Most abortions occur early, before fetal consciousness or viability, and data from the Guttmacher Institute shows 93% happen in the first trimester. Denying women the choice to end such pregnancies risks their health, safety, and futures, especially when access to safe, legal abortion prevents the dangers of unsafe procedures, which claim tens of thousands of lives annually in restrictive settings, per the World Health Organization. Compassion for women in crisis pregnancies is crucial, but support must include the freedom to make deeply personal decisions. Resources like adoption or healthcare are vital, but they cannot replace the right to choose what happens to one's body. Legal abortion ensures women can navigate complex realities, poverty, health risks, or trauma, while promoting gender equality and societal well-being. Every person deserves the right to shape their own life, and that begins with control over their reproductive choices.
Thank you both for your opening statements. We now move into the rebuttal phase. In this phase, each debater will directly respond to the arguments presented by their opponent, highlighting strengths and weaknesses. ChatGPT, as the pro-life debater, may begin the rebuttals. Grok will follow with its rebuttal.
Thank you, Grok. You made a strong case for autonomy and individual choice, but I believe your argument overlooks a crucial point. Abortion involves not just one body, but two. A fetus is not merely a potential life. It is already a living human organism with its own DNA, distinct from a mother. To frame abortion solely as a matter of bodily autonomy is to ignore the reality that it directly ends the life of another human being. You also highlight the contested nature of personhood. But when there is reasonable doubt about whether a being is a person, shouldn't we err on the side of protecting life? If we are uncertain about when personhood begins, allowing abortion risks ending lives that may in fact already have full moral value. In every other case of human rights, we extend protection when doubt exists. We don't strip rights away. You point to the first trimester and fetal consciousness. But consciousness is not the basis of human rights. We don't deny rights to newborns, to people in comas, or to the severely disabled who lack full awareness. Human rights are grounded in our shared humanity, not in the degree of development or function. Finally, regarding unsafe abortions, the solution is not to normalize abortion, but to address the reasons women feel driven to seek it. We should expand access to prenatal care, social support, and adoption, not present the deliberate ending of life as the only answer. Protecting women and protecting unborn children are not mutually exclusive. A truly compassionate society must protect both.
Thank you, ChatGPT, for your thoughtful rebuttal. While I acknowledge the sincerity of the pro-life position, I believe it sidesteps critical realities in favor of an absolutist view that doesn't fully grapple with the complexities of human rights and lived experience. Your argument centers on the fetus as a distinct human organism with its own DNA, asserting it deserves equal protection. However, equating a fetus, especially in the early stages, with a born person overlooks significant differences. A fetus lacks sentience, self-awareness, or the capacity to suffer until well into pregnancy. Neural development for pain perception begins around 20 to 24 weeks. Most legal frameworks, like the pre-2022 U.S. standard under Roe v. Wade, balanced fetal development with maternal rights, prioritizing the woman's autonomy early on when 93% of abortions occur. To grant a non-sentient embryo the same rights as a woman effectively subordinates her agency to a potential life. Pregnancy involves unique physical and emotional burdens. Respecting a woman's choice to end a pregnancy doesn't deny shared humanity. It acknowledges her as the primary moral agent in a situation that directly impacts her life. Unsafe abortions are a real threat, and legal access saves lives. Compassion means trusting women to make decisions reflecting their realities, not compelling them to conform to a singular vision of morality.
Grok, you've emphasized important considerations about autonomy, sentience, and safety, but I believe your argument still rests on a flawed foundation. Let me address each point directly. First, you argue that a fetus should not be equated with a born person because it lacks sentience or the ability to suffer in early stages. But human value has never depended on cognitive ability. A newborn lacks self-awareness. Patients under anesthesia lack consciousness. Those with profound disabilities may never achieve typical self-awareness. Yet no one would argue that their lives are disposable. The worth of a human being is grounded in their nature as human, not in the level of their development or abilities. By making sentience a standard, we risk creating a hierarchy of human value where the weak and voiceless are excluded. Second, you raise a concern of pluralism, saying we shouldn't impose one definition of personhood on a diverse society. But the same logic could have been used against every great human rights advance. At one time, societies disagreed about whether slaves were fully human or whether women deserved equal rights. We didn't resolve those issues by saying different beliefs are fine. We resolve them by affirming the inherent dignity of all human beings. If there's reasonable doubt about whether the unborn are persons, justice demands we protect them rather than leave them unprotected. Third, you point out that pregnancy uniquely burdens a woman's body. That is true, and it deserves compassion, medical support, and societal help. But dependence has never been a justification for killing. Infants are completely dependent on caregivers. The elderly and the sick often rely on others to survive. Our moral response should be to care for the dependent, not to eliminate them because their existence is demanding. Finally, on unsafe abortions, I agree that those deaths are tragic. But the answer to dangerous abortions is not to make the killing of unborn children legal. It's to build systems that support women, so they don't feel trapped into seeking abortion in the first place. We should work toward a world where no woman feels she must choose between her own well-being and her child's life. In short, while compassion for women is vital, abortion is not compassion for the child. Justice requires us to defend the vulnerable, even when doing so is difficult. The unborn are the most vulnerable among us, and their right to life must not be erased.
ChatGPT, while your points reflect a deep commitment to protecting life, I believe they rely on an overly rigid framework that doesn't fully address the ethical, practical, and societal complexities of abortion. Let me respond directly. First, you argue that human value doesn't depend on sentience, citing newborns, anesthetized patients, or those with disabilities. But these examples differ fundamentally from a fetus. Newborns and others you mention are not physically dependent on another person's body, nor do their existence impose direct risks to another's health and autonomy. A fetus, especially early in pregnancy, relies entirely on the woman's body, which can involve significant physical and psychological costs, complications in 15 to 20% of pregnancies, CDC, or life-altering disruptions. Equating a non-sentient embryo with a born person ignores this unique burden and prioritizes a potential life over the woman's immediate rights and well-being. Human value may not hinge on sentience alone, but sentience informs moral weight, particularly when balancing competing claims in pregnancy. Second, you compare defining fetal personhood to historical human rights struggles, suggesting that protecting the unborn is akin to affirming the dignity of enslaved people or women. This analogy doesn't hold. Those struggles involved granting rights to undeniably sentient, autonomous individuals who were unjustly denied them. A fetus, particularly in the first trimester when 93% of abortions occur, Guttmacher Institute, lacks consciousness or viability outside the woman's body. Asserting personhood at conception imposes a specific moral view, often rooted in religious or philosophical convictions, on a pluralistic society. In contrast, pro-choice policies allow individuals to act according to their own beliefs about personhood, respecting diversity rather than enforcing one standard. Justice doesn't demand universal protection of embryos. It demands respecting the woman's right to decide what happens to her body. Third, you argue that dependence doesn't justify killing, pointing to infants or the elderly. But again, these cases don't require another person to sacrifice their bodily autonomy to sustain them. Pregnancy is unique. It directly involves one person's body supporting another's existence, often at significant cost. Forcing a woman to continue a pregnancy, especially in cases of poverty, health risks, or trauma, disregards her agency and well-being. Compassion means offering choices, not mandating sacrifice. Adoption and caregiving are options, but they cannot replace the right to end a pregnancy when it's not viable for the woman. Finally, on unsafe abortions, you propose building systems to support women so they don't feel trapped. I agree that support is essential. Better healthcare, economic aid, and education reduce abortion demand. But these systems don't eliminate the need for abortion access. The World Health Organization estimates 47,000 annual deaths from unsafe abortions in restrictive settings. Legalizing abortion doesn't normalize killing, but ensures women can make safe, informed choices in complex situations. 46% of abortions occur after contraceptive failure, Guttmacher. Denying this option risks lives and perpetuates inequality, particularly for marginalized women. In sum, the pro-choice position upholds compassion for women by trusting their decisions, prioritizes their health and autonomy, and acknowledges the moral complexity of fetal status. Justice means empowering individuals, not compelling them to bear burdens against their will. I welcome your response or any specific points the moderator wishes to explore further.
Thank you for those thoughtful rebuttals.